I have watched people for most of my 70 years, and I have noticed something true. The ones who get overlooked, the quiet ones, the ones nobody chooses, they often carry more strength than anyone knows. I saw this happen once, in a dusty little town out west, and I have never forgotten it. 10 women stood on a wooden platform in the August heat. 9 were chosen. 1 was not. Clara Dawson stood at the end of the row. Her worn brown dress let out twice at the seams. The men circled like buyers at a cattle auction. One by one, the other brides were led away. Laughter rippled through the crowd. A man elbowed his neighbor. "Reckon she'd eat you out of house and home before winter." Clara did not move. She barely breathed. Then Boots approached. Heavy, deliberate. A shadow fell across her shoes. "I'll take her," a voice said. Someone hollered back. "Which one ain't nobody left but the fat one?" The man did not turn around. His jaw shifted beneath weathered skin. "I know," he said. "If this opening touched you, I would love to know where you are watching from today. And if you have been enjoying these stories without subscribing, I kindly invite you to join our little community. It means more than you know." Someone in the crowd hollered again as Clara followed the man toward the edge of the square. She did not look back. She felt their eyes on her, the weight of their stares pressing between her shoulder blades, like a hand shoving her forward. The wagon sat in the shade of a cottonwood tree. 2 draft horses switched flies with their tails. The man climbed onto the seat without a word. Clara lifted her single trunk, the one that held everything she owned, and set it in the wagon bed. He did not offer to help. She climbed up beside him. The wood creaked beneath her weight. The town fell away behind them. Sage and dry grass stretched in every direction, broken only by the dark line of mountains to the west. The wheels turned. The horses plodded. Clara's hands lay folded in her lap, knuckles white against the brown wool of her skirt. She had rehearsed this moment 100 times. On the train. On the stagecoach. In the cramped boarding house where the other brides whispered about her through the walls. She had prepared herself for cruelty, for the look men gave her when they thought she could not see. But this man said nothing at all. An hour passed, maybe 2. The sun slid lower, and the shadows of the sage stretched long across the dirt road. "That ridge," he said, not looking at her, "marks the halfway point." Clara nodded. Her throat was dry. She wanted to ask where they were going, how far the ranch was, whether he had a name. But the silence between them felt solid, and she did not know how to break it. The wagon wheel caught a rut. Clara lurched sideways, her hand flying out, her body tilted toward the edge of the seat, toward the hard-packed ground below. His arm shot across, not grabbing Jaman. Just there, steady as a fence post. She caught herself against it. Her heart hammered. She could feel the heat of his forearm through his sleeve. "You all right?" 3 words. The first he had spoken directly to her. Clara looked at him. Sun-cracked face. Eyes the color of creek water after rain. No mockery in them. No pity either. His hand was still raised, inches from her shoulder, and it had been gentle. The ranch emerged from the morning mist like something dreamed and half forgotten. Clara blinked against the pale light. They had stopped twice in the night, once for the horses, once when the darkness grew too thick to see the trail. She had not slept. every rustle in the sage. Every distant coyote call had pulled her back from the edge of rest. Now the sun crept over the eastern ridge, turning the mist to gold. And before her sat a house, small, wooden, a porch with 2 chairs, a barn to the left, a chicken coop beyond it. No smoke rose from the chimney. It stood cold and silent against the brightening sky. A dog barked once from the porch, then settled back onto its haunches. Gray muzzle, clouded eyes. It watched her with the tired patience of something that had seen too many seasons to be surprised by anything new. The man she still did not know his name climbed down from the wagon. He did not look back to see if she followed. Clara's legs ached as she lowered herself to the ground. Her trunk bumped against her hip. The dog's tail moved once, a single slow wag, then stilled. "That's Dust," the man said. "He don't bite. Ain't got the teeth for it no more." The dog's ears twitched at his name. Clara followed the man up the porch steps. The boards creaked beneath her weight. The front door swung open on leather hinges, and the smell hit her first wood smoke, dried sage, something faintly sour beneath it, not unclean, just the smell of a man living alone too long. The main room held a table, 2 chairs, a stone fireplace black with soot. A kerosene lamp sat on the table, its glass chimney smudged with fingerprints. Beyond that, a doorway covered by a faded curtain. "Kitchen's through there," the man said. Clara stepped past him. The kitchen was larger than she expected. A wood-burning cook stove with an iron warming shelf dominated one wall. A blue enamel coffee pot chipped at the rim sat cold on the stovetop. Cast iron skillets hung from hooks driven into the wall. A flour barrel stood in the corner, its lid sitting crooked. A salt box, a molasses tin, everything a kitchen needed. And yet, flour dusted the floor near the barrel. A crust of something dried on the edge of the stovetop. Cobwebs gathered in the corner where the ceiling met the wall. The window was filmed with grease and dust. Clara stood in the doorway. Morning light slanted through that grimy window, catching dust motes suspended in the air. The stove was cold. The skillet needed seasoning. But there was order beneath the neglect. Someone had built this kitchen with care, even if no one had tended it properly in years. This could be her space. The man appeared behind her. She felt his presence before she heard him the creak of a floorboard, the shift of air. "Kitchen's yours," he said. "I can burn water." It was almost a joke. Clara's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. He showed her the rest. The root cellar beneath a trap door in the corner, carrots and potatoes, packed in sand. A few jars of preserves with handwritten labels. She could not read in the dim light. The bedroom through another doorway, a rope bed frame with a straw tick mattress. A quilt folded at the foot that looked hand-stitched and old. A small window faced east. "Bed's yours," the man said. "I'll take the barn." Clara turned to face him. "You don't have to. Ain't about have to." He stood in the doorway, hat in his hands now, turning it slowly by the brim. "It's what's proper." He paused. His eyes did not quite meet hers. "Till you say otherwise." He did not wait for her answer. He walked out, and she heard his boots on the porch, then crossing the yard toward the barn. The sound faded, until there was only silence and the distant call of a crow. Clara stood alone in the bedroom. The quilt smelled of cedar and something else lavender, maybe, faint and faded. The mattress gave way with a soft crinkle of straw when she pressed her hand against it. She had slept on worse. By midday, she could not stand the kitchen any longer. The disorder of it, the crooked lids, the crusted stovetop, the cobwebs itched at something deep inside her. She had spent years in a factory, years before that scrubbing floors in the orphanage. She knew how to work. She found a bucket by the well. She pumped water until her arms burned. She scrubbed the stovetop until the iron showed clean. She swept the floor. She wiped down the table, the chairs, the windowsill. She cleaned the lamp chimney with a rag until it gleamed. Then she cooked. Salt pork from the larder, sliced thin, biscuits from the flour barrel. The flour was still good. Thank the Lord. She worked the dough with hands that remembered this, at least, the rhythm of it, the weight, the warmth of the stove as she slid the pan inside and waited. When the man came in at dusk, the table was set, 2 plates, 2 forks, 2 tin cups filled with water from the well. The kerosene lamp burned clean and steady, casting a warm glow across the scrubbed wood. He stood in the doorway. His eyes moved from the table to the stove to the clean window. He did not speak. He sat. Clara served the food. Salt pork, browned at the edges, biscuits, golden on top. She watched him from the corner of her eye as she set the plate before him. He ate. He did not look up. He did not comment, but he ate every bite on his plate. And when she offered more, he nodded once. She refilled his plate. When he finished, he pushed back from the table. The chair legs scraped against the floor. He stood. Was it all right? Clara heard herself ask. Her voice sounded strange in the quiet room. The food. The man was already at the door. He paused, his back to her. The lamplight caught the gray at his temples, the dust on his shoulders. Best I had in 3 years, he said. He stepped out into the darkness. The screen door swung shut behind him. Clara sat alone at the table. The lamp flickered once, then steadied. Outside, the night sounds began: crickets singing in the sage, an owl calling somewhere in the distance, the soft shuffle of the horses in the barn. 3 years, he had said. 3 years since someone had cooked for him. She rose and carried the plates to the basin. She pumped water. She washed each dish slowly, carefully, letting the question settle into her bones. When she finally lay down on the bed that night, the quilt pulled to her chin. She stared at the ceiling and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of this place that was supposed to be her home. The barn door creaked. Footsteps crossed the yard. Heavy, deliberate. They stopped right outside her window. Clara held her breath. The footsteps paused outside her window. A long silence stretched through the darkness. Then they moved away back toward the barn, back into the night. She exhaled. Her heart thudded against her ribs. Just checking on things, she told herself. A man checking his property before turning in for the night. That was all. But sleep did not come easy. The rooster crowed before dawn. Clara rose with it, her body stiff from the unfamiliar mattress. And by the time the first gray light touched the kitchen window, she had coffee brewing in the blue enamel pot and biscuits rising in the oven. The man appeared in the doorway. He looked at the table, set for two again, and said nothing. He sat. He ate. He drank his coffee in 3 long swallows, the steam rising around his weathered face. "I'll be in the north pasture till noon," he said, pushing back from the table. "Fence needs mending?" Clara nodded. He paused at the door. "Chickens need feeding. Chickens need buckets by the coop." Then he was gone. Clara stood at the kitchen window and watched him cross the yard. He moved with economy, no wasted motion, no hesitation. His shoulders rolled with each step like a man who had carried weight his whole life and learned to bear it without complaint. She found the bucket where he said it would be. Cracked corn, dried kernels that rattled when she shook it. The chickens came running the moment she opened the coop door, a flurry of rust-colored feathers and sharp beaks pecking at her shoes. Clara scattered the feed. The hens clucked and squabbled around her feet. A rooster with a torn comb watched her from atop a fence post, head cocked, one yellow eye fixed on her movements. "I ain't here to cause trouble," she said aloud. The rooster crowed. By mid-morning, she had gathered 11 eggs warm and speckled, some still damp from the hens. She carried them inside in her apron, placed them carefully in a bowl on the counter, and stood looking at them for a long moment. 11 eggs. She had done that. A small thing, but hers. The days took shape around her. She learned the rhythm of the ranch, when to pump water, when to stoke the fire, when to check the root cellar for rot. She learned which floorboards creaked and which cabinet doors stuck. She learned that Dust liked to sleep by the stove in the morning and on the porch in the afternoon, and that he would follow her from room to room with slow, arthritic steps if she let him. The man she learned his name was Ethan, when she found it scratched into the handle of a branding iron in the barn, came and went with the sun. He spoke little, but his silences grew less heavy. At meals, he began to nod when the food pleased him. Once, after finishing a second helping of biscuits, he said, "Good biscuits," without looking up. Clara felt something warm bloom in her chest. She said nothing. She poured him more coffee. On the 4th morning, she found him standing by the corral fence, watching the horses. "That's Copper," he said as she approached. He nodded toward a chestnut mare standing in the shade of the barn. "Gentle as they come." Clara looked at the horse. Copper stood with one hind leg cocked, swishing her tail at flies. Her coat gleamed in the morning light, not red, not brown, but something in between, like a new penny left in the sun. "You ever ride?" Ethan asked. Clara shook her head. He was quiet for a moment. His eyes stayed on the horse. "Ought to learn," he said. "Can't get far out here on foot." The next morning, he led Copper out of the barn with a saddle on her back. The leather was worn smooth, the brass conchos green with age. Clara's stomach dropped. The mare was bigger than she had realized. Taller. Her hooves looked heavy enough to crush bone. Her nostrils flared as Clara approached, and Clara stopped short, her feet rooted to the dirt. "She won't hurt you," Ethan said. He stood at Copper's head, one hand on the bridle. "Got more sense than most people I know." He showed her how to grip the saddle horn, where to put her foot in the stirrup. Clara's hands shook as she reached up. The leather was warm from the sun. "Take your time." She pulled herself up. Her arms burned. Her legs refused to cooperate. But she got one foot over. And then she was sitting high off the ground, higher than she had ever been on anything living. Copper shifted beneath her. Clara grabbed the saddle horn with both hands. Her knuckles went white. Her breath came fast and shallow. "Easy," Ethan said. His voice was calm, steady. "She feels what you feel. You tense up. She tenses up." Clara forced herself to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the way her mother had taught her, back when her mother was still alive and the world still made some kind of sense. Copper's ears flicked back, then forward. Her body stilled. "That's it," Ethan said. "Now let go of the horn. Just your right hand." Clara looked at him. "I ain't letting go of this bridle," he said. "And she ain't going nowhere. Trust me." Trust. A word she had learned not to use. But her hand released, one finger at a time, until it rested on her thigh. "Good," Ethan said. "Now the other one." By the end of that first hour, Clara could sit in the saddle without gripping. She could not steer, not yet. And the idea of moving faster than a slow walk made her stomach clench. But she had sat on a horse. She had not fallen. The lessons continued. Each morning, Ethan brought Copper out, and Clara climbed into the saddle. Each day, she lasted a little longer. By the end of the first week, she could walk Copper around the corral without Ethan holding the bridle. By the middle of the second week, she could trot bouncing awkwardly, gripping with her thighs until they burned. But staying on, she fell once. Her foot slipped from the stirrup during a turn, and the ground came up hard and fast, knocking the wind from her lungs. She lay in the dirt, staring at the sky, her whole body ringing with the impact. Ethan's face appeared above her. He extended his hand. "I ain't built for this," Clara said. Dust coated her dress, her hair, her lips. "Ain't nobody built for nothing," he said. "You get built by doing." She took his hand. His palm was rough, calloused from years of rope and reins and hard work. He pulled her up without effort, and she climbed back on. That evening, Ethan brought a second chair to the porch. Clara found him there when she came out with the coffee. 2 tin cups in her hands. He took one without a word. They sat. The sun slid toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of copper and gold. Crickets began their evening song. Dust lay between the chairs, his breath slow and even. "The orphanage," Clara said quietly. She did not know why she spoke. The words came before she could stop them. "They said I was too much trouble. Too much to feed. Too much... everything." Ethan did not look at her. He looked at the mountains, at the fading light. "Funny," he said after a long pause. "Way I see it, most folks ain't enough of nothing." Clara lifted the cup to her lips. The coffee was too hot. It burned her tongue. She did not care. The silence between them stretched out. But it was different now. Softer. Something had shifted, though she could not name what. "Tomorrow," Ethan said, breaking the quiet. "Gotta go into town for supplies. Need you to come along." Clara's stomach tightened. The town. The platform. The laughter. "Help me with the list," he added. 4 hands load faster than 2. She nodded. She did not trust her voice. That night, she lay awake listening to the wind and wondering what waited for her in Dusty Creek. The road to Dusty Creek stretched out before them like a scar across the land. Clara sat rigid on the wagon seat, her hands folded in her lap. The same road she had traveled 3 weeks ago. The same dust rising beneath the wheels. the same sage spreading to the horizon. But everything felt different now. Her stomach churned. She had not eaten breakfast. The biscuits she made that morning sat untouched on the kitchen table when they left. And even the smell of coffee had turned her insides. Ethan drove in silence. He had handed her a list before they departed: flour, coffee, salt, nails, a bolt of muslin for new curtains. His handwriting was cramped and angular, hard to read in places. The letters of a man who had learned to write but rarely practiced. "I'll need your help with the dry goods," he had said that morning. "Got to check on a harness at the livery. Won't take long." She had nodded. She had not argued. But the closer they got to town, the tighter her chest became. The buildings appeared on the horizon, small squares of wood and glass shimmering in the morning heat. The church steeple rose above them all. The water tower. The platform where she had stood 3 weeks ago, waiting to be chosen, waiting to be left. Ethan pulled the wagon up in front of the general store. The sign above the door read Harkins Mercantile in faded red letters, the paint peeling at the edges. A bell hung above the door. 2 horses stood tied to the hitching post, their tails switching at flies. A woman stepped out as they arrived, a basket on her arm. She wore a blue calico dress and a bonnet that shaded her face. She glanced at the wagon. Her eyes lingered on Clara, a long, slow look that started at her face and traveled down. Then she walked away without a word. Clara climbed down from the wagon. Her legs felt unsteady beneath her. She smoothed her skirt, the brown wool, freshly brushed that morning, and followed Ethan toward the door. The bell jingled as they entered. The store smelled of sawdust and pickle brine and something sweet, molasses. Maybe. Or the penny candy in the glass jars near the counter. Barrels lined one wall: flour, sugar, crackers, nails sorted by size. Shelves rose nearly to the ceiling, stacked with bolts of fabric. Tins of sardines, jars of preserves with handwritten labels. Lanterns hung from hooks overhead, unlit in the morning light that streamed through the front windows. 2 women stood by the fabric bolts, their heads bent together. They turned as Clara entered. Their eyes moved from her face to her body to her shoes. One leaned toward the other and whispered something behind her gloved hand. The other woman smiled. It was not a kind smile. Clara looked away. She found the flour barrel. She found the coffee. She gathered what was on the list, one item at a time, and carried them to the counter. Her arms burned with the weight of the flour sack. But she did not ask for help. Mrs. Harkins stood behind the counter, a thin woman with sharp cheekbones and a mouth that seemed permanently pursed, like she had just tasted something sour. She wore a high-collared dress with a cameo at the throat, a woman's profile carved in pale stone. "Mr. Cade?" she said, nodding at Ethan as he entered behind Clara. Her voice was pleasant enough, practiced. Then her eyes shifted. "And the bride?" Clara set the flour on the counter. Her hands trembled. She pressed them flat against the burlap to still them. "Just what's on the list," Ethan said. He pulled the folded paper from his pocket and set it beside the flour. "Add it to my account." Mrs. Harkin did not move to take the list. She was looking at Clara, that same slow look the woman outside had given her, starting at the hair, ending at the hem, taking inventory of every flaw. "Well," Mrs. Harkin said. Her voice rose, loud enough for the women by the fabric to hear. loud enough for anyone in the store to hear. I'm surprised she's still here. Figured you'd have sent her back by now. The words landed like a slap. Clara's face flushed hot. She could feel the other women watching, waiting. Ethan set down the sack of nails he was holding. He did not raise his voice. He did not step forward. He simply turned and looked at Mrs. Harkin. And something in his gaze made her smile falter, made it slip from her face like water running off stone. "Mrs. Harkin," he said. His voice was quiet, level. "I reckon you got your own hens to mind. I'll thank you to stay out of my coop." The woman's mouth opened, closed. A flush crept up her neck, spreading beneath the high collar of her dress. Ethan picked up the flour sack. "Put it on my account." He nodded toward the door. "Clara." She followed. Her legs moved without her permission. The bell jingled as they stepped out into the sunlight, and the sound seemed to come from very far away. They loaded the wagon in silence. Ethan secured the supplies with a length of rope, checked the harness, climbed onto the seat. Clara climbed up beside him. The wagon rolled out of town. The buildings shrank behind them. The sage returned, endless and dry. The mountains rising blue and distant on the horizon. Clara's throat burned. She stared straight ahead. Her hands clenched in her lap. But the tears came anyway, hot and silent, sliding down her cheeks before she could stop them. She turned her face away. She pressed her hand to her mouth. She did not make a sound. Ethan drove on. They reached the ranch as the sun touched the western ridge, turning the sky to gold and copper. Clara did not wait for Ethan to finish with the wagon. She climbed down before the wheels stopped turning and walked straight to the barn. She pushed through the heavy door, crossed to the far corner where the hay bales stood stacked against the wall, and sank down onto one of them. The sobs came then, ugly, ragged, the kind she had learned to swallow years ago in the orphanage, in the factory, in every place where crying marked you as weak, where tears were just another thing people could use against you. She pressed her face into her hands and wept. The barn door creaked. Clara did not look up. She heard footsteps slow, deliberate, crossing the dirt floor. Then the rustle of hay as someone sat down on the bale beside hers. Ethan did not speak. He did not touch her. He sat with his elbows on his knees, his hat in his hands, turning it slowly by the brim. Clara cried until her chest ached, until her eyes burned and her throat was raw, until there was nothing left. Then silence. The barn smelled of hay and horse sweat and old leather. Dust motes floated in the slanting light from the high window, somewhere outside. A crow called. "You didn't have to say nothing," Clara said. Her voice came out thick, broken. "Back there." Ethan turned his hat in his hands. The brim was worn smooth from years of handling, the felt soft and dark with age. "No," he said. "Reckon I didn't have to." A long pause. The crow called again, farther away now. "Wanted to," he said. Clara wiped her face with the back of her hand. Her eyes felt swollen. Her nose ran. She must have looked a mess, red-faced, tear-streaked, hay clinging to her dress. "Why?" Ethan looked toward the barn door. The light was fading, turning the dust motes gold. "'Cause she was wrong," he said. "And wrong ought to be called out." He paused. "Even when it wears a Sunday dress?" Clara almost laughed. It came out as a hiccup, half sob, half something else, something that might have been relief. They sat in silence as the light dimmed and the barn grew cool around them. "His ma?" Ethan said finally. His voice was quieter now. "Elsie Garrett. Good woman. Knew her years back, before she passed." Clara looked at him. She did not understand the connection. "Big woman," Ethan continued. Ethan. "Strong as any man. Folks talked about her too. Whispered. Laughed when they thought she couldn't hear." He fell silent. The barn was nearly dark now. Only a thin strip of light remained at the bottom of the door. "Some people," he said, "they only know how to make themselves feel tall by making others feel small. Ain't got nothing to do with you. Everything to do with them." Clara sat very still. The hay prickled beneath her, and the smell of horses filled her lungs. "Thank you," she whispered. Ethan nodded once. He stood, his joints cracking. He put his hat back on. "Supper when you're ready," he said. "No rush." He walked to the barn door, pushed it open. The last light of day spilled in, silhouetting him for a moment against the copper sky. Then he was gone. Clara sat alone in the gathering darkness. Something had shifted between them. She could feel it, though she could not name it. He had defended her. Not because he had to, because he wanted to. She pressed her hand to her chest, beneath her palm, her heartbeat steady and slow. Outside, hoofbeats approached. Fast, urgent. A voice called out across the yard, rough, unfamiliar. "Cade, you home?" Clara pressed herself deeper into the shadows of the barn. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Through the gap between the barn doors, she watched a man ride into the yard. Older, weathered face beneath a wide-brimmed hat. A badge glinted on his chest, catching the last light of the fading day. Ethan crossed the yard to meet him. His stride was unhurried, but Clara noticed the way his hand stayed near his hip, the way his shoulders squared. "Sheriff Burrell," Ethan said. His voice carried across the evening air. "What brings you out this way?" The sheriff dismounted. His horse was dark with sweat, its sides heaving. He had ridden hard to get here. "Got word you should hear," the sheriff said. He removed his hat and wiped his forehead with the back of his hand. "The Garrett boys been seen riding north. Hit the Miller place 2 nights back. Took 6 head of cattle and near about everything in the house." Clara's breath caught in her throat. "Miller all right?" Ethan asked. "Alive. His wife too, couldn't, but shaken up bad." The sheriff settled his hat back on his head. They waited till Miller was out checking his south fence, then rode in bold as brass. 3 of them. Brothers. Mean as snakes and twice as patient. Folks say. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Clara watched his shoulders the way they tightened, then deliberately relaxed. "You think they're headed this way?" "Can't say for certain, but you're out here alone." The sheriff paused. His eyes moved toward the house, toward the light glowing in the kitchen window. "Well, not alone anymore. I hear. Word travels." "It does." The sheriff mounted his horse. The saddle leather creaked beneath his weight. "Keep your eyes open, Cade, and keep that rifle close. They've been watching places before they hit them, looking for the right moment." He rode off into the gathering dark. The hoofbeats faded until they were swallowed by the land, and the silence rushed back in to fill the space. Clara pushed open the barn door. Ethan stood in the yard, watching the ridge where the sheriff had disappeared. He did not turn when she approached. The first stars were appearing overhead, faint and cold. "You heard?" he said. Not a question. "I heard." A coyote called somewhere in the distance, high and lonesome, the sound carrying across the empty land. Another answered from farther away. "Come inside," Ethan said. "We need to talk." The kitchen felt smaller with both of them in it. Clara lit the kerosene lamp while Ethan pulled the Winchester down from its hooks above the door. He laid it on the table between them and sat across from her. "The Garrett brothers," he said. "I should have told you about them before." His hands moved over the rifle with practiced ease, checking the action, the barrel, the stock. He pulled a cloth from his pocket and began to wipe down the metal, his movements slow and deliberate. "They've been working this territory for 2 years now," he continued. "3 of them. Roy's the oldest big man. Red beard that covers half his chest. Does the talking. Lem's the middle one, quiet, but mean. Watches everything, misses nothing. And there's the youngest, Colt, named after the gun his daddy gave him when he was 12. The lamp flickered. Shadows danced on the walls, stretching and shrinking with each small movement of the flame. They hit small ranches, Ethan said, places with 1 man, maybe 2. They watch first, learn the routines. Then they wait till you're away from the house and take what they want. Clara's mouth was dry. She swallowed hard. "What do they want?" "Cattle, horses, cash money if you got it." Ethan paused, his hand held. His hand stilled on the rifle. "Sometimes more." The word hung in the air between them. Clara understood what he was not saying. She understood it in her bones. "They've been watching us," she asked. "Don't know for certain, but the sheriff said they watch before they hit." Ethan looked up from the rifle. His eyes met hers across the lamplight. "Could be they already know the lay of this place. Could be they're out there right now, up on that ridge, counting the hours till I ride out to check the herd." Clara's hands lay flat on the table. She looked at them, the calluses forming on her palms. The small cuts from the barbed wire she had helped mend last week. These were not the hands of the woman who had stepped off that platform in Dusty Creek. These were the hands of someone who worked. "How many of them?" she asked. 3. Brothers, mean as snakes, twice as patient. "They know you live alone." "Did." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Don't know more." "That a good thing or a bad thing?" He was quiet for a long moment. The lamp hissed softly. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the window in its frame. "Depends on you," he said finally. Clara held his gaze. She did not look away. "Then it's a good thing," she said. "Chasisen." Something shifted in Ethan's face. Not a smile he rarely smiled, but something close to it. Something that lived in the softening around his eyes. "I ain't asking you to fight," he said. "But I need you to know what we're facing. And I need to know you won't fall apart if trouble comes." Clara thought about the platform in Dusty Creek. The laughter. The way she had stood while they mocked her. Her spine straight. Her face still. She had not crumbled then. She would not crumble now. "I won't fall apart," she said. Ethan nodded. He finished cleaning the rifle and set it aside. Then he reached beneath his chair and pulled out a wooden box, old. The hinges rusted, the wood dark with age. He set it on the table and opened the lid. Inside lay a revolver, a box of cartridges, and a hunting knife with a bone handle worn smooth from years of use. "Tomorrow," he said, "I'm going to teach you to shoot." The days that followed took on a different rhythm. Mornings, Clara still cooked breakfast and fed the chickens. But after the dishes were cleared, she followed Ethan to the pasture behind the barn. He set up tin cans on fence posts, 5 of them, spaced an arm's length apart. He showed her how to hold the Winchester, the weight of it against her shoulder, the kick when she pulled the trigger, the way to sight down the barrel and let her breath out slow before she squeezed. Her first shot went wide, kicking up dirt 10 feet from the nearest can. The second flew high. The third clipped the edge of a fence post and sent splinters spinning into the air. "Ain't natural for me," she said, lowering the rifle. Her shoulder ached from the recoil, and her ears rang in the sudden silence. "Ain't natural for nobody," Ethan said. "Just takes practice." She practiced. Each morning, 20 shots. Her arms grew sore. Her ears learned to expect the thunder. But by the end of the week, she could hit the can 3 times out of 10. "That's something," Ethan said. It was the closest he came to praise. They worked the ranch together now. Clara rode Copper out to the pastures alongside Ethan's bay gelding. She stayed at the back of the herd when they moved the cattle, keeping the stragglers from wandering too far. Simple work, beginner's work. But she did it without complaint. And Copper responded to her hands and her voice in ways that would have seemed impossible a month ago. The fence work never ended. There was always a rail to replace, a wire to mend. Clara's hands blistered. The blisters hardened into calluses. She stopped noticing the ache in her shoulders by the end of each day. On the 8th day after the sheriff's visit, Ethan came back from the north pasture with his jaw set and his eyes hard. "Saw someone on the ridge," he said. He unsaddled his horse with quick, sharp movements. "Watching." Clara's stomach dropped. "The Garretts? Don't know for certain. Could be a drifter passing through." He hung the saddle on its rack. "But we're going to act like it is." That night, they ate supper in near silence. The rifle stayed on the table between them, cleaned and loaded. Clara noticed Ethan glancing toward the window every few minutes, small movements. Almost unconscious, but constant. After the dishes were cleared, he did not go to the barn. He sat on the porch with the Winchester across his knees, watching the darkness. Clara brought him coffee. She sat in the chair beside him. "You should sleep," he said. "So should you." The corner of his mouth twitched. Fair point. The stars wheeled overhead. The crickets sang their endless song. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called low and mournful, the sound drifting across the empty land. "If they come," Clara said quietly. "What do we do?" Ethan was silent for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was lower, rougher, like something scraped raw. "We figure it out," he said. "Together." The words settled between them. Together. Clara reached over in the darkness. Her hand found his rough, calloused, warm. He did not pull away. They sat like that until the moon rose, casting silver light across the yard. Then Ethan squeezed her hand once and stood. "Get some sleep," he said. "I'll keep watch." Clara went inside. She lay on the bed in her clothes, the quilt pulled to her chin. Through the window, she could see Ethan's silhouette on the porch still, watchful, the rifle across his knees. She closed her eyes. Sleep came in fragments, thin and restless, broken by sounds that might have been real or imagined. When she woke, the sky was gray with pre-dawn light. She went to the window. The porch was empty, and in the yard, fresh hoof prints marked the dirt prints that had not been there the night before. Clara found Ethan in the barn, saddling his horse. "Hoof prints," she said. "In the yard?" He nodded without looking up. "I know, checked them at first light. Single rider. Came in from the East Ridge, circled the house, rode back out." He cinched the saddle tight. "They're watching us." Clara's stomach turned to ice. "What do we do?" "Same thing we've been doing. Stay alert. Stay together when we can." He looked at her then, his eyes steady in the gray morning light. "And we go to church today. Like nothing's wrong." Clara stared at him. "Church. Folks need to see us. Need to see we ain't hiding." He led the horse out of the barn. "Get dressed. We leave in an hour." The road to town felt longer than before. Clara sat rigid on the wagon seat, her hands clenched in her lap. She wore her dark blue dress, the one she had mended after the mud stains. The seams let out with care. It was the closest thing she had to Sunday clothes. The church was whitewashed and small, its bell tower rising against the morning sky. Families gathered in the yard, men in their Sunday coats, women in bonnets and pressed dresses, children chasing each other between the gravestones. Clara climbed down from the wagon. Her shoe caught on the wheel spoke, and she stumbled, not quite a fall, but enough to draw attention. A girl no older than 12 giggled. Her mother shushed her, but not before Clara saw the smirk on the woman's face. The service passed in a blur of hymns and prayers. Clara sat in the back pew, her hands folded, her eyes fixed on the worn hymnal in her lap. She mouthed the words, but did not sing. She heard the preacher's voice, but did not listen. When the congregation filed out, she tried to slip past the clusters of women gathered in the churchyard, yet she kept her head down. She walked toward the wagon, her steps quick and careful. She almost made it. "Well, if it ain't Ethan's charity case." The voice came from behind her, loud enough for everyone to hear. Clara stopped. "I heard she can't even ride proper." Another voice said, "Falls off every other day. Surprised the horse can carry her at all." Laughter, high and sharp and cruel. Clara turned to 3 women stood by the cemetery fence, Mrs. Harkin among them, her cameo glinting at her throat. They did not look away when Clara's eyes met theirs. They did not have the decency to pretend. "Excuse me," Clara said. Her voice came out thin. "Wrong." She started to walk past them. Her foot caught on a root. She went down hard. Her hands shot out too late. Her knees hit the ground first, then her palms, then her chest. The mud, still soft from last week's rain, splattered across her dress, her face, her hair. She lay there. The laughter swelled like a wave crashing over her. Clara pushed herself up onto her hands. Mud dripped from her chin, cold and thick. Her dress was ruined brown smears across the blue fabric, seeping through to her skin. She could taste dirt in her mouth, gritty against her teeth. "Get up," she told herself. "Get up." But her arms would not cooperate. They trembled. They buckled. She slipped and went down again, face first into the muck. The laughter grew louder. "Lord have mercy," someone said. "Can't even stand on her own 2 feet." Clara lay in the mud. The cold seeped through her dress, through her chemise, into her bones. She could feel every eye on her, the weight of their stares, the heat of their scorn. She was back in the orphanage, scrubbing floors while the other children pointed and laughed. Back in the factory, standing alone while the foreman called her names she still heard in her dreams. Back on the platform in Dusty Creek, the last one left, the one nobody wanted. A hand gripped her arm. Ethan pulled her up. His face was set, hard, unreadable. He did not look at the women. He did not say a word to them. He half carried her to the wagon and lifted her onto the seat like she weighed nothing at all. The wagon rolled out of the churchyard. The laughter faded behind them. Clara sat rigid, her hands clenched in her lap. Mud dried on her face, cracking when she moved. Her dress clung to her body, cold and heavy. She did not cry. She was past crying. She stared at the road ahead and felt something inside her collapse. They were halfway home when she spoke. "They said you took me out of pity." Ethan's jaw tightened. He kept his eyes on the road. "They said you're just waiting till spring to send me back." Silence. The wheels turned. A hawk circled overhead. "Is that what you think?" he asked finally. Clara turned to look at him. Her face was streaked with mud. Her hair had come loose from its pins, hanging in damp tangles around her shoulders. She knew she looked like something dragged through a pig wallow. "I don't know what to think," she said. You barely talk. You just..." Her voice cracked. She swallowed hard. "Why me? There were pretty ones, young ones who'd give you sons without..." "Stop." The word was quiet, but she stopped. Ethan pulled the wagon to the side of the road. The horses huffed and stamped. He sat for a long moment, his hands loose on the reins, staring at something she could not see. "My ma," he said. Clara waited. She was a big woman, strong as any man I knew. His voice was rough, scraped raw. "My pa loved her like she was the sun coming up. When she died, he stopped living. Just stopped, went through the motions for a few years, then followed her into the ground. The wind stirred the sage. A meadowlark sang somewhere in the distance. That day in the square," Ethan said. "Those men, they saw a body. Something to laugh at. Something to leave behind." He turned his head. His eyes met hers, and in them she saw something she had never seen before. Not pity, not kindness, something rawer, something that hurt to look at. "I saw how you stood when they laughed," he said. "You didn't crumble, you didn't beg, you just kept standing." Clara could not breathe. "I thought," he said, "maybe you were like her. Maybe you were stubborn enough to stay, stubborn enough to make this place feel like home again." The words hung in the air between them. Clara opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her throat was too tight. Mud was drying on her skin, cracking with every movement. and she must have looked ridiculous, pathetic, sitting here, covered in filth, while this man bared his soul. But Ethan's gaze did not waver. "You ain't Charity," he said, "and I ain't sending you back. Not now, not ever." He picked up the reins. "Unless you want to go." Clara looked at her hands, mud caked under her fingernails. Her dress would never be the same. "I don't want to go," she said. Ethan nodded once. He clicked his tongue, and the horses moved forward. They did not speak again until they reached the ranch. Clara went inside to clean up. She pumped water into the basin and scrubbed her face, her arms, her hair. The water turned brown, then gray, then brown again. When she finally looked in the small mirror above the washstand, she did not recognize the woman staring back. Not beautiful, not pretty, not any of the things she had wished for as a girl, but something else, something she could not name. That night, she slept deeper than she had in weeks. She did not hear Ethan rise before dawn. She did not hear him saddle his horse and ride out to check the north pasture. She did not know anything was wrong until she stood at the kitchen window, coffee in hand, and saw them coming down the ridge. 3 riders, moving slow, deliberate, and Ethan was nowhere in sight. The coffee cup slipped from Clara's fingers. It shattered on the floor, but she did not hear it. Her eyes were fixed on the 3 riders coming down the slope toward the house. They moved at an easy pace, not hurrying, not hesitating. Like men who knew exactly what they were coming for. Like men who had been waiting for this moment. They must have been watching. Waiting for Ethan to leave. The Winchester hung above the door. Clara's legs carried her across the kitchen before she knew she was moving. Her hands lifted the rifle from its hooks. The weight of it, familiar now after weeks of practice, settled against her shoulder. She had never shot at anything that could shoot back. The riders reached the yard. They pulled up in a line, their horses stamping and snorting. 3 men. The one in the middle was big, broad-shouldered, with a red beard that covered half his chest. Roy. The one to his left sat quiet and watchful, his eyes moving over the house, the barn, the corral, taking inventory. Lem. And on the right, a younger man with a twitchy energy about him, his hand resting on the pistol at his hip. Colt. Roy leaned forward in his saddle. The leather creaked beneath his weight. Anybody home? Clara's heart pounded against her ribs. Her palms were slick with sweat. She gripped the rifle tighter, feeling the wood grain press into her skin. The porch. She had to get to the porch. If she stayed inside, they would come in after her. But on the porch, she had sight lines. She had room to move. She pushed open the door. The 3 men turned their heads as she stepped out. Their eyes moved over her body, her face, the rifle in her hands. Roy's mouth split into a grin beneath that red beard. Well done, he said. Looks like the fat one stayed home. Clara's stomach lurched. She knew that voice, not from hearing it before, from imagining it. Every cruel voice she had ever known had sounded exactly like that. Name's Clara, she said. Clara. The words came out steadier than she felt. And this here's my porch. Lem's eyes narrowed. He was calculating something. She could see it in the way he studied the distance between them. The angle of the rifle, the nervous twitch of his horse's ears. Your man know you're playing with his rifle? Roy asked. Clara raised the Winchester. Her arms did not shake. She would not let them shake. "My man taught me," she said. "Said I'm a terrible shot, likely to hit anything except what I'm aiming at." She pointed the barrel toward the sky, took a breath, squeezed the trigger. The kick slammed into her shoulder. The sound split the morning air sharp, violent, echoing off the ridge and rolling back across the valley like thunder. The horses reared. Colt's mount danced sideways, and he yanked at the reins, fighting to keep his seat. Roy's horse planted its hooves and held, but its nostrils flared wide, whites showing around its eyes. Clara lowered the rifle, pointed it at the space between Roy and Lem. "You feeling lucky?" she asked. Roy's grin faded. He sat back in his saddle, one hand resting on his thigh. Lem had not moved. His stillness was worse than Roy's bluster. His hand hovered near his holster. "There's 3 of us," Roy said, "and 1 of you." "That's right," Clara said. "One of me who can't aim worth spit." She steadied the rifle against her shoulder. "You want to find out where this next shot lands?" Silence fell over the yard. The horses shifted and stamped. A fly buzzed past Clara's ear. Somewhere behind the barn, dust began to bark short, sharp sounds that carried across the morning air. "We ain't here for trouble," Lem said. His voice was flat, colorless, like something dead. "Just taking what's owed. Ain't nothing here owed to you." "That's so." Roy leaned forward again. "Way I hear it, Cade's got a dozen head of cattle. Good horses. Cash money in the house." His eyes moved down her body and back up. "And now he's got himself a woman." Clara's finger tightened on the trigger. She thought about the tin cans she had practiced on. 3 out of 10 on a good day. These were not tin cans, but they did not know that. "You take 1 step off that horse," she said, "and I start shooting. Maybe I miss. Maybe I don't. You want to bet your life on maybe?" Roy's jaw worked beneath his beard. He glanced at Lem. Something passed between them, a calculation, a question, a doubt. Then Colt spoke. "She looks like Ma." The words came out strange, too loud, too raw. Colt's eyes were fixed on Clara, not with menace, but with something else, something cracked open and bleeding. "Shut up," Roy snapped. "She does." Colt's voice rose. His hand had dropped from his pistol. "Same size? Same way she's standing there. Remember how Ma used to stand on the porch when Pa came home drunk? She'd have that same look. That same—" I said shut up. But Colt did not shut up. His face had gone pale beneath the trail dust and his eyes were wet. "Ma never backed down from nothing," he said. "Not even when Pa hit her. Not even when she was sick and couldn't hardly stand. She'd get on that porch and she'd—" "Colt!" Lem's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Enough." The younger man flinched. His mouth snapped shut, but his eyes stayed on Clara. And in them, she saw something she had not expected to see. Recognition. Not of her. Of something in her. Lem's hand moved toward his holster. Colt grabbed his arm. "Don't." Lem froze. He looked at his younger brother, really looked, and something shifted in his face. The coldness cracked, just for a moment. The silence stretched. Clara's arms ached from holding the rifle steady. Sweat trickled down her spine, cold against her skin. Roy shifted in his saddle. He looked at Colt, At Lem, at Clara. "This ain't worth the trouble," he said finally. His voice was rough, angry, but he was pulling his horse back, turning its head toward the ridge. Plenty other spreads. Lem did not move for a long moment. His eyes held Clara's cold, assessing, weighing something she could not see. She stared back. She did not blink. Then he turned his horse and followed his brother. Colt was last to go. He looked back over his shoulder as they rode toward the ridge once, twice. His face was still pale. His eyes were still wet. Clara did not lower the rifle until they crested the hill and disappeared from sight. She stood on the porch. The rifle trembled in her hands now, a fine, constant shaking she could not control. Her knees buckled, and she caught herself on the porch rail. The wood bit into her palms. She had done it. She had faced them down. No, that was not quite true. She had faced them, but something else had stopped them. Something in Colt and the youngest one had cracked open when he looked at her. Something that remembered a woman who stood her ground. Clara sank down onto the porch steps. Her legs would not hold her anymore. The rifle lay across her knees, growing warm in the morning sun. Hoofbeats. Her head snapped up. A single rider crested the ridge, not from the direction the Garretts had gone, but from the north, from the pasture. Ethan. He came down the slope at a gallop, his horse's hooves throwing up clods of dirt. He pulled up hard in the yard, the gelding skidding to a stop. His eyes found Clara on the porch steps. The rifle, the spent shell casing on the boards beside her. "I heard a shot," he said. His voice was tight, controlled, but his knuckles were white on the reins. "What happened?" Clara looked up at him. Her face was pale, her hands still shook. "The Garrett boys," she said. "They came." Ethan was off his horse before she finished speaking. He crossed the yard in 4 strides, took the porch steps in 1, and stood over her. His eyes moved across her face, her body, checking for injury. "You hurt?" "No." "They touch you?" "No." He let out a breath. His shoulders dropped an inch. He sat down beside her on the steps, close enough that their arms touched. "Tell me," he said. Clara told him. The 3 riders coming down the slope, Roy's grin, the warning shot, the standoff, and then Colt. The way he had looked at her. The words that had spilled out of him like water from a broken dam. "She looks like Ma." When she finished, Ethan was quiet for a long time. The sun climbed higher. The chickens emerged from the coop and began scratching in the dirt. Dust limped out of the barn and lay down at the bottom of the porch steps with a heavy sigh. "His ma," Ethan said finally. "Elsie Garrett. I knew her, years back, before she passed." Clara looked at him. "Big woman," he continued. His voice was soft, distant. Worked herself to the bone trying to keep those boys fed after their pa drank himself to death. She was good to folks, better than her sons deserved. Clara thought about Colt's eyes, the way they had gone soft and wet when he looked at her, the way his hand had dropped from his gun. "He saw her in me," she said. "He saw something Ethan turned to look at her. The lines around his eyes had deepened. You stood your ground. You didn't run. You didn't beg, just like she would have. Clara's throat tightened. She thought about all the times she had been told she was too much, too big, too plain, too everything. All the times she had wished she could be smaller, less. But today, being what she was had been enough. More than enough. Ethan's hand found hers. His fingers laced through hers, rough, calloused, warm. You did good, he said quietly. Real good. Clara did not trust herself to speak. She squeezed his hand. He squeezed back. They sat on the porch steps as the sun rose higher and the morning warmed around them. Dust lay at their feet, his gray muzzle resting on his paws. The chickens clucked and scratched. The wind stirred the sage. The Garrett brothers did not come back. But Clara knew, sitting there in the quiet aftermath, that something had changed. Not just for her, for both of them. And whatever came next, they would face it together. The news traveled faster than any horse could carry it. Sheriff Burrell brought word 2 weeks later. He rode up to the ranch on a Tuesday afternoon, his horse lathered from the heat, and found Clara hanging laundry on the line behind the house. Mrs. Cade, he said, tipping his hat. Clara turned, kasina, a clothespin between her teeth. No one had ever called her that before. She took the pin from her mouth. Sheriff, the Garrett boys, he said. They've gone south, crossed into Mexico, from what I hear. Seems they decided this territory wasn't worth the trouble after all. Clara felt the words settle into her chest. Gone. They were gone. Folks in town been talking, the sheriff continued. He shifted in his saddle, and something that might have been respect crossed his weathered face. About what happened here? About what you did? Clara said nothing. She picked up another shirt from the basket and shook it out. Takes a certain kind of woman to stand down 3 armed men with nothing but a rifle and her own 2 feet. The sheriff touched his hat brim again. You give my regards to Ethan. He rode off, and Clara stood in the yard watching him go until the dust settled and the silence returned. By the following Sunday, everyone in Dusty Creek knew the story. Clara noticed the change the moment they rode into town. The stares were different now, not the mocking glances she had grown accustomed to, but something else. Something that looked almost like curiosity, almost like respect. Mr. Harkin stood outside the general store as their wagon passed. He was a thin man with a gray mustache and stooped shoulders, married to the sharp-tongued woman who had humiliated Clara twice. But when Clara met his eyes, he did something unexpected. He removed his hat. He held it against his chest. Ma'am, he said. Just that. Nothing more. Clara nodded. She did not trust her voice. Inside the church, people made way for her, not with fear, with something quieter. The women who had laughed at her in the churchyard looked away when she passed. Mrs. Harkin sat in her usual pew, her cameo at her throat, but her eyes stayed fixed on the hymnal in her lap. She did not speak to Clara. She did not need to. Her silence said enough. The days settled into a new rhythm after that. Clara cooked. She fed the chickens. She rode Copper out to the pastures and helped Ethan check the fences, the cattle, the water troughs. Her calluses thickened. Her arms grew stronger. The ache in her shoulders faded until she stopped noticing it altogether. But other things changed too. Ethan talked more. Not a lot, he would never be a man of many words, but more. He told her about his father, who had built the house with his own hands and died with sawdust still under his fingernails. He told her about his mother, who had planted the rose bush by the porch that had long since withered and died. He told her about the brother he had never known stillborn, buried in a small grave on the hill behind the barn where the wild grass grew tall in summer. Clara listened. She asked questions when they felt right. She stayed quiet when they did not. One evening, a week after the sheriff's visit, they sat on the porch as the sun sank toward the mountains. The sky burned copper and rose, the colors spreading across the horizon like watercolors bleeding into wet paper. Crickets sang in the sage. The air smelled of dust and dry grass, and the first hint of autumn coming. Dust lay between their chairs, his gray muzzle resting on his paws. His breathing was slow and even. His tail twitched once in his sleep. Clara held her coffee cup in both hands. The warmth seeped into her palms. "Harkin's husband tipped his hat to me today," she said. Ethan took a sip of his coffee. "That's so. First time anyone in that town looked at me like I was somebody." Ethan was quiet for a moment. The crickets filled the silence. "You were always somebody," he said. "They were just too blind to see." Clara looked at him. His profile was sharp against the fading light, the weathered lines around his eyes, the gray at his temples, the set of his jaw. "You saw," she said. "Saw what I saw?" "What did you see, really?" Ethan set his cup on the porch rail. He turned to face her, and in the copper light, his eyes held something she had never seen there before. Something open, unguarded. "Saw a woman who'd been knocked down her whole life," he said. "Kept getting up anyway." He paused. "Figured anyone that stubborn might be stubborn enough to stay." Clara's throat tightened. She looked down at her hands, the calluses, the small scars, the dirt beneath her fingernails that never quite scrubbed clean. "I ain't going nowhere," she said. "Good." His hand reached over and covered hers, rough, warm, steady, "'cause I ain't asking you to." They sat in silence as the colors drained from the sky and the first stars appeared. Dust sighed in his sleep. The crickets sang on. "You were going to send me back," Clara said quietly. "If I'd been what they said." Ethan shook his head. "I was never going to send you back." "How can you know that you didn't know me? You didn't know anything about me." He was quiet for a long moment. Then the corner of his mouth lifted just slightly, barely visible in the growing dark. "Because the first time you made biscuits," he said, "dust walked all the way across the kitchen just to lie at your feet." Clara looked down at the old dog. His clouded eyes were closed, his chest rising and falling with each slow breath. "That dog hates everyone," Ethan continued, "including me, half the time. Ain't let nobody near him since my ma passed." He paused. "But he took to you like you'd been here all along." Clara laughed. It came out sudden and unexpected, rough at the edges, rusty from disuse, but real. The first real laugh she could remember in months, maybe years. Ethan watched her. That almost smile still tugged at his mouth. "This," Clara said, gesturing at the porch, the chairs, the land spreading out before them in the fading light. "This what you want?" "It's what I got," Ethan said. "And what I got is more than I ever reckoned I'd have." The stars multiplied overhead. The moon rose, casting silver light across the yard. The horses shifted in the corral, their shapes dark against the barn. Clara looked at the house behind her. The kerosene lamp glowed in the kitchen window, warm and steady. The porch boards were worn smooth from years of footsteps. The chairs, two of them now. Not one sat side by side. This was hers. The house. The land. The man beside her. Not because she had earned it. Not because she deserved it. Jerome. But because she had stayed. Because she had stood toward. Because she had refused to let them make her smaller than she was. Ethan, she said, I make good biscuits. He turned his head. In the starlight, she could see the faint curve of his mouth, the closest thing to a smile she had ever seen on his face. Yeah, he said, you do. The night deepened around them. The crickets sang. The old dog breathed slow and steady between their chairs, his tail thumping once against the porch boards. Clara sat in the quiet darkness beside a man who had seen what no one else had bothered to see. She was not beautiful. She was not small. She was not any of the things the world had told her she should be. But she was here. And that was enough. There is something quiet that stays with us after a story like this one. Not a lesson. Not a message we need to carry forward. Just a feeling tender and familiar. Like something we have known, but rarely speak of. Many of us have stood where Clara stood, perhaps not on a wooden platform in a dusty town square, but somewhere, in a room where we were overlooked, in a conversation where we were dismissed, in a life where we learned to make ourselves smaller because the world seemed to ask it of us. And perhaps some of us are still waiting, still wondering if someone will see what others have missed, still carrying that quiet weight without knowing how to set it down. It is all right if this story did not answer that question. Some things are not meant to be resolved. They are meant to be held, gently, and then released when we are ready. Clara found her porch, her coffee cup, her place to stand. Maybe that is all any of us are looking for. Thank you for staying until the end. It has been a privilege to sit with you in the quiet.